Hi, book club members. I'm Jen,
And I'm Carrie.
and this is Warhammer 40k Book Club, where we read from a crag. This is episode number 102, and our book is Pilgrims of Fire by Justin D. Hill.
Pilgrims of
I
Fire.
have Fire, which tells the story of Sister Heloise as she joins the Indomitus Crusade, would be the easiest, pithiest, and retraces the steps of Saint Catherine. We posted several questions on our website, WH40kbookclub.com, and we encourage participation in our conversations via Twitter, YouTube, our site, or Encrypted Vox channel. Spoiler warning, if you haven't yet read this book, go to the site, check out the book and the questions, and then come back to this episode as we'll be discussing the book from start to finish at very, very long last in great detail. First off, a quick little disclaimer here is that I am the reason, yet again, actually, it's not hockey this time.
No.
For us being late, I had an emergency hospital visit this weekend and a surgery, and it's been really fun. I'm living my best life. So I am also going to apologize in advance. My sound quality is going to be pretty garbage tonight, guys. I'm kind of sitting close to the mic when I'm talking, but I'm going to be falling back a lot when I'm. This ain't comfortable, guys. But wanted to talk about this book.
Her husband and I keep telling her to stop worshiping Nurgle, and she just doesn't listen. And so she has to, get a gallbladder removed because of it.
I have a hockey player. It is impossible to not have welcomed Nurgle into my life. She did a 2-hour session yesterday on the ice with the high school boys, and the smell when she gets in the car, it's harrowing. And I mentioned specifically the high school boys because, believe it or not, they smell worse. And it's not necessarily because of the hockey funk. It's because, to quote my daughter, they smell like death and Arctic thunder axe. So, she comes off like she has contact stink and she stinks. And I'm just like, ugh. Anyways, this is how I accepted Nurgle into my heart. That's how they get you. To the children. With that, let's dive in. This question format is going to be a little different. We're going to talk about the book, obviously, but I want to have a little bit of a meta commentary because Carrie and I discovered something very interesting about this book, and it is that people aren't digging it as much as we kind of thought that they would. So let's dive in and start at the top, as always. Do you like the book?
I loved it. It was great.
All right. I really liked it. I really did like it. I really enjoyed it. There are a couple complaints that I have.
I don't think you understand. I liked a sister's novel.
We're going to talk a lot about that, actually.
They were the main characters, and I liked it. Normally I only like the sisters when they're supporting cast, but no. This was awesome.
I have an entire question that I'm basically calling the Carrie question coming up specifically about that because, and I want to talk, you know what, we'll go a little out of order here and we'll talk about what parts stood out to us here in a bit because let's address the elephant in the room here. It's like, did we like this? The sisters in this book, did it address, and I'm going to use R because we both have these same complaints. Did it address some of our core complaints in previous depictions of the sisters?
Yes, and also no at the same time, I think. This to me was I've always wanted with the sisters because it shows how badass they are, how what amazing fighters they are, and they even talk about when they're going up against, world eaters. Or no, it was the Crimson Slaughter. Pretty much world eaters. World eaters, diet world eaters light, whatever you want to say.
The artists formerly known as the world eaters.
Yes. They don't just eat worlds, they slaughter them. All right, that was pretty much
Crimson,
the thing.
in crimson.
Right, well, because what's the color of blood?
But not in crimson and clover.
No. And they even talk about how that they're not these augmented humans, right? With this, armor, and then not only that, but they have, the gifts of the gods or whatever. And these are still women that are badass and are going forward. And the other thing I really appreciated in here was when they talked about the sacrifice that they make, but it wasn't in a slitting my wrists way. It was we do this to inspire others. And it's amazing. Like, I was like, okay, I can get behind that type of martyrdom. I may not agree with it, but I can get behind that more than I messed up. Woe is me. I must wear this cloak of repentia and, absolve my perceived sins, because half the time they're not really sins. They're not really mistakes. I'm sorry your mom broke your Linkin Park CD when you were a kid. Now everything's just awful. That's kind of how I've always felt about him. But I love the way that Justin D. Hill really highlighted that part of them, was how they're going forth and they're singing and moving forward and they're inspiring all these people. They inspired a freaking penal legion. Guys who have nothing to live for.
I want to talk about that portion of it a little bit more here in a minute, because there's a lot going on there. But yes, I agree with everything you just said. The sisters. So the martyrdom piece, it always becomes this I just want to die for the emperor. I just want to die for the emperor. I just want to die for the emperor. Or this, I must repent because for one moment, in an instant, a fraction of an eye, I wondered, will we win? And now I deserve to die. Points if you know what book I'm referencing. But it's these things that I've always really not liked that piece of it. But this one actually served. I thought he really tempered it very well, and he presented it, as you said, there was a scene very early in the book when I was like, oh, okay. And there's a character who's like, I will stay back. I will fight, even though I know I'm going to die. I will become that martyr. I will do this. And Heloise, as she's leaving, she's like, oh yes, this will inspire the troops. And we get to see that, right? Of this, this bold last stand of this person. And it's, okay, it serves a purpose. And they're not
I think that's always been my thing. Yes, you just nailed it right there. The martyrdom with a purpose. So what I think of is this one movie that haunts me to this day, U-571.
Yes.
Do you know exactly what scene I'm going to reference?
I know the exact scene you're talking about.
Yes, it's awful. It is awful. And the guy knows he's telling him to die to save everybody else. And that is what I'm okay with this, with them going, I stay behind. I know I'm going to die, but that's okay, but because it's to save everybody else. That I'm fine with. Not the whole, well, I'm supposed to go sacrifice myself. No. That's not your purpose, is to sacrifice yourself. Your purpose is to fight for the emperor and make it the best fight you can. And if the fight means you sacrifice yourself in this moment, like so many space marines do, knowing they're going to sacrifice themselves, that's it. Not this whole,
right.
The only thing I have to do is die for the emperor. No, you're supposed to fight for the emperor the best way you can. And if you die in the process, so be it. I don't want to say good, but so be it. Versus, like you said, I had doubt once, or I questioned my superior. So now I just, need to go fling myself into death.
Yeah, exactly. Now I need to sling myself off a cliff. And I think one of the things that really frustrates me about this, and I know at this point, this is actually, I think this is going to be the third podcast in a row that I've talked about this. And I understand that the Imperium is very wasteful in general, but there's just such a waste level to it that I'm the amount of training, the amount of the dollar value. Can you tell that I did contract work in the past? The dollar value on each of these sisters. I'm the idea that you just throw all of that away, the time, the effort, the value of
at
you
your
is
earliest
too good.
chance.
At your earliest chance. And look, here's the thing. The Death Corps of Krieg does that, and it makes sense. Especially after reading the Krieg book, after they pretty much confirmed that they're all just clones, and they all have very short timers anyways. Totally get it. These people are disposable, essentially, the Krieg. They view themselves as they're not going to live long because of the world that they live in. I don't know how great the cloning is. These people, when they're oh, okay, yeah, we're just going to throw ourselves senselessly. Because remember in that book, they talked about a lot of times how they were God, it's so senseless. That makes sense. The sisters don't. The sisters, it has always bothered me that they're just like, I'm so zealous, and I understand
You can be
that.
zealous without throwing yourself in death's jaws the first chance you get.
Yeah,
That's what confused me. And I'm
they're
not saying,
nuns with guns, not zealots with guns.
like, and we've seen, case in point, we've seen priests that are really zealous. And I'm not talking about Frater Matthew, but I'm talking about other, zealous priests who don't throw themselves in. And they're like at the complete opposite end of that. They're zealots, and yet they're fat, lazy effers. But they're still like zealous. It's a weird dichotomy. And so I know that they kind of do that to like kind of be a nice opposite to the sisters, but at the same time, like, but the sisters don't have to be the complete opposite where they are zealots and let's just throw ourselves into the jaws of death. Like, we don't have to do that every single time. Like, to me, the
Right.
Battle Sisters, it's about being smart tacticians on top of that. Like, these are badass women. And why are they badass women? Because they can do everything the Space Marines can do, but without augmentation. That is why I've always, wanted to like the Battle Sisters. And this book,
They have the power armor, they
yes,
have the weapons,
this
they
book
have the training.
highlighted this perfectly.
This book, I thought, did a really good job of showing that outside of the Space Marines, this is the closest thing you can get with an unaugmented human. And by the way, yes, they are women, and yes, this is, again, they are the nuns with guns, but that's terrifying if you're the enemy. And these are all very strong, very capable characters who, and I've talked about this a lot as part of like feminist critique. We see a lot with female characters. There's this tendency to either like, they can't be confident because then they come off as cocky. So we have to make them constantly question themselves and constantly not think they're good enough. We didn't really see that in here outside of a couple of characters, right? And people are people. People are unique. You're going to have that across the board. Not everyone's going to be the same. So I liked that. I got that. As much as Lisbeth kind of drove me a little bonkers, I was also like, okay, I get what you're doing here. And then there was also this idea that there's also this theory of like, or they become the I take no questions, nobody talk to me because I'm a strong, independent woman and I dress down everyone who talks to me. And he resisted that urge too. These were just characters who, and the reason that I really liked Heloise was that I felt that Heloise was just pretty comfortable in who she was. Yes, she had questions. Yes, she doubted. Yes, she wondered about things, but you didn't get the impression
didn't even
that
like
she was
she didn't like one of her superiors.
right.
And she wasn't going to risk herself over it.
Yeah, like this is a very human. I mean, they still show that these people are very human, and I thought that was really well done because again, they don't just sanctify them entirely, but then they also don't make them just oh god so obnoxious and whiny. And I really thought he did a good job of it, and I thought he did a really good job of showing that yeah, these women are fighters and they are warriors, and they have to see that whole scene going through the rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum. It shows these women, they face stuff, and they have the power of bolt guns and the God Emperor on their side. Like that is for some reason, and this is the thing that about the sisters that's always really weird to me.
Oh my God,
because as an atheist, that shit inspires me.
They prayed the Gellerfield back to life. How more badass do you gotta be? It's just like, damn. I mean, just oh my, okay.
Well, and like there is, and again, I don't understand why, because I say this again, like as an atheist, I don't understand why the sisters in particular really just check all my boxes. Because that concept, that this belief in the God Emperor is that powerful. And here's where you get into this, is it really the God Emperor, or is it just their belief? But their belief is so strong, and their prayer is so strong. They can mend a Gellerfield, and they can do all these other things, and they can inspire. And it's just one of those things where you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, as a person who definitely wants to believe in that divinity of the Emperor, right? And it makes that argument of, oh, he's not a god. Is he though? Like, if he's not, the warp sure as heck thinks he is. Because, did you see this? I thought that was great. So we have them on one hand, right? In their purity and their sanctity. Then we have the Chem Dogs. Did they serve a good narrative purpose as
I
being
love
like
them.
that foil? Were you invested in them?
Yes. I was very invested in them. God, I can't. I was actually kind of surprised that Salem wasn't knifed in the back before the end. I was kind of,
Yeah.
I was kind of rooting for Chalice to do so, especially after they jumped on him and like decided to break his fingers and put a cigarette in his eye for fun, I guess. I don't even exactly know why they did that, but it's like, okay. I mean, I know that they're all like, former prisoners and all that, and and I was really sad for that one, former colonel had to be put into the penitent engine, but at the same time, that's like what he wanted to do.
So at first when they came in, I was like, oh, okay, penal legion, all right. And like when I was first reading them, like that first chapter of theirs, I was like, oh yeah, I get it. They're like super ungodly and clean, and these guys are the dirty, very ungodly. But they're both fighting for the emperor. I get what you're doing here. But then like the more and more you read into it, you can't help but get a little invested in them. And yeah, it is one of those concepts that I really like in the Warhammer 40k universe, because we've always said this, right? Like, what is the most feminist science fiction universe in the world? Warhammer 40k, because if you can pull a trigger, you can fight for the God Emperor. And no, they do not wait. Like, as wasteful as I say that the Imperium is, because it is, they don't waste people. Like in that, like, if you can pull a trigger, you can go fight.
Yeah.
So like prisoners, like, these are horrible human beings, and guess what? They can still fight. And
guess what?
There was
you
something
too
kind of
will
fun
die
about
for
it.
the God Emperor.
Right, exactly. Like, at least go die for the God Emperor in your last moments of your horrid life. There was something there was a nice juxtaposition between them. And sometimes when the sisters were just getting maybe a little too pure, they would jump over to a Chem Dogs, and you were like, oh, there we go.
One thing I kind of liked about the Chem Dogs is that with Shin, when he said, "I'm gonna go off for a bit," and they're all like, "Yeah," and they talked about how like they had an idea of what he did, but they never wanted to know. I was like, well, dang, now I want to know, and they never did tell you. But I kind of like that they never did.
I kind of did too. Same. There was always a thing where I was like, what is it though? But quite frankly, I think by the end of the book, the way that they had built it up so much, like
It didn't
for
matter.
his character, it really, A, it didn't matter. And B, there was nothing that they could have said that you would have been like, oh.
Right.
Again, I'm one of those people, like the what is in Marcellus Wallace's briefcase. I was really, really pissed when Tarantino basically confirmed that it was his soul, because I was like, we didn't need to know. Like, your own inference was just fine. You could put anything that you wanted in there.
And honestly,
Like,
I never
I'm
thought
good with
about
secrets.
I never thought about what was in there. I didn't care. That wasn't the point of what
No.
was in there.
It was not the point. I mean, sometimes it like, I understand the desire to be like, what was worth killing this many people over? Like, I kind of get that, but you could have said drugs, you could have said money, you could have said his soul, you could have said gold bricks. Like,
the reason why I didn't think anything of it, because like there's these 3 or 4 punk kids that decided to steal from him.
and like, there's all these, like, again, you could have put pretty much anything in there. They're criminals. You could have put anything in there, and we would have been like, seems legit.
I mean, it could
This
have
was
been
kind of
like,
one of those things too.
could have been like 10 gold bars. Just shiny gold. We had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. And you would have been like, fair. They've established him as being ruthless. And so this character too, I thought they established him as being ruthless. He's a criminal. We've seen him in action. He is not a godly man, but it didn't really matter what he had done. So I actually kind of liked that sort of thing. There were a couple of things that didn't get revealed that I was kind of like, oh, okay. But that was not one of them. That was one where I was like, oh, that's fine. I did think they served a good purpose. I thought that it was kind of good to have that juxtaposition. I always felt like Justin Hill did a really good job of bringing them in just when the sisters were getting maybe a little too sanctimonious.
Mm-hmm.
We needed to temper it out a little bit and remind you that there are normal humans, and not corrupt world leaders or people on like, the denizens of the Imperium,
Right.
as repugnant as they occasionally are. So one of the things that I think this tees nicely into, because there's a lot to talk about here, is that in this book, the concept of the Sororitas, the world of the Sororitas, is almost a setting in and of itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have the beginnings across these three timelines, I guess you would say, as these three stories kind of converge. You have the sisters, their presence is everywhere, and it is felt, and it shapes everything. Was this effective? Did this work? Did you like that approach to it?
I had a hard time understanding why at first. Like, it was like, okay, so we have this thing that's, right as the Eye of Terror splits open the galaxy, which is kind of neat. And then we have, 100 years in the future, but I didn't understand like what was the purpose of, gosh, I don't remember the name of the little girl, Branwen. Like, what was the purpose of bringing her into this? Like, what was all that about? So it took me because we always read those books where it brings up something from the past and you're like, I don't understand how this affects anything. And then it all ties it in the end. And I thought it did a really good job of, just as I was like, but what did happen to Branwen? And then it pops up like, another chapter would be then. Kind of reminded me a lot of like I was telling the kids about when I was first reading Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. Like I was reading these chapters to be like, okay, I got to the cliffhanger, and then they jump over because the Two Towers get split up into two factions. Basically, there's not Bilbo, wrong Hobbit book, but there's Sam and Frodo. And then there's everybody else. And just as I was like really getting into everybody else, it got into cliffhanger, and then it went over to Sam and Frodo. I was like, no, I don't care about them. And then you'd get, to Return of the King, and it would start off with the other guys like, oh, but I don't care about them. What's going on with Sam and Frodo? It was like so masterfully done how he did it. And I felt like this did that too. I was like, well, I'm not ready to like not read about Branwen anymore. Okay, I'm reading about this now. Oh, that's really good. No, I don't want to go back to Branwen right now. I thought that was so well done. And then how it just all kind of like came to head, because all I could think of is when it really dawned on me what they were talking about in this world. It's like, there's no way anybody's still alive. I guess I have little faith that the Abbey would still be standing, which is kind of crazy to think about. But then it kind of made, I don't know, the whole thing with Lisbeth at the end seem even more ridiculous, in my opinion.
We're going to talk about the end in a second. That's probably one of the things that I struggled with the most. I think I would agree mostly with you. I think some of the transitions I was kind of like, okay, they felt a little jarring to me. I didn't have quite that smoothness there. I like the idea of the three stories converging in on it, right? And even though once we go into the past and then we go into the future and we go into the past and we go into the future, you kind of know that, like, okay, these are eventually all, like, what's going on then is definitely going to affect now. Like, this is going to have some sort of purpose here.
Be now.
Soon.
How
and
soon?
Real soon. I like that narrative structure. I do. We're going to talk more about that. I'll save those thoughts for later, because that is one of the things that's getting flack online.
Okay.
That'll be a criticism or commentary, which will be about half of this, because I have a lot of thoughts. But I thought that did work well, and I do understand what you're saying with like, oh, I'm not ready to move away from this character yet, and so I think generally it worked for me. Where I was like, oh no, okay, this is good too. Like, that's fine, I'll take this too. But there were some times where I was also like, Like, I feel like we left a lot on the table here. I also did like that, similar to Knights of Macragge, this book all of a sudden goes horror on you. And you weren't really expecting it. I should have known as soon as they went through the Cicatrix Maledictum. We should have been like, oh, it's about to get real now. But I thought it was really, it goes from a really nice battle book to all of a sudden just, oh, by the way, the Cicatrix Maledictum is awful. And I think I've said this in previous podcasts, but anytime a Gellerfield fails or cracks or falls, your girl is all about it. That's I feel like mentally I sit up. Yep. Exactly. Every time it happens, I'm like, oh, now you have my full attention. Things are going to get good. And things did get good. And I thought that, and I will say, having read previous Justin Hill books, mostly the Cadia series and some of his short stories here and there, I was not expecting the horror element, but B, to handle the horror element so well.
Yeah.
Not like I enjoyed the stuff in Knights of Macragge a little bit better, obviously, because that whole thing that like clicked a lot of my
well,
things
that was
that
different
I really
because
liked.
they were like lost at sea in a way too. So
True.
So you had like kind of little different things going on there, but yeah.
Exactly. They it was a little bit of a different flavor, but again, I thought, and here's the thing is that reading that section of the book made me really angry at Peter Fahravari all over again.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about him, but okay.
Bear with me for a moment.
All right.
The sisters, I have to think. I'm about to make a bold statement here, so but yeah, I think I stand by this. The sisters, perhaps more than any faction, deserve a really good horror novel. I think they are uniquely suited to it, and maybe that's because I'm a sucker for like exorcism movies. The idea of the holy versus the profane, I really like that sort of stuff. I feel as though
kind of got that in Deacon of Wounds.
Yes, kind of, but that guy sucked. Like, he was not a good person. he was not good. The book was good. I'm not saying the book sucked, and that David Annandale did a bad job with the character. I'm just saying that character that guy sucked. But I feel as though just their general demeanor and their general outlook and the way they handle themselves, especially in this book, right? When they describe some of the scenes and some of the stuff that they're seeing and how they deal with it, they're uniquely suited to that sort of a setting. And then it made me think of Requiem Infernal, and then I got pissed all over again. They got done dirty.
You
I'm
okay?
just saying. No, I'm not.
We haven't read one of his books in years. We got to let it go.
No.
No,
I legitimately want people to know. Every now and then, that book, like a scene from that book, will just pop in there. Like Ray, it just pops in there. And then I get salty all over again. Actually, I think the thing for me, and this is your fault, this is all your fault, it was when you compared her to the cheerleader from Heroes.
Compared
That's
who?
I can't think of the main character from that book now. But her whole, like, she had the dark version of her and the light version of her, Sister Mercy, and
You see,
generic name.
when we were done discussing that book, I flushed that 100% out of my memory. I couldn't tell you a thing that happened in that book.
Why? Why did it not lodge itself in your brain like a splinter of fuckery?
Because I hated it that much.
That's
That
fair.
and the Reverie book. The only thing I remember about that is the stupid broken mirror, and then that makes me mad all over again. But everything else in that book's flushed out of memory.
That book lives rent free in my head, y'all. Less so than Requiem Infernal. Requiem Infernal. Anyways, this book got me a little salty again too, because I was like, this is actually a good horror portion with the sisters. They deserve better than Peter Fahravari.
Well, he hasn't written anything since, so I'd like to say that we had something to do with that.
I think you just jinxed us. Like all of a sudden they're going to be like, by the way, guys, new horror
That
novel.
is true. That is true.
And we're going to be like,
and then you're going to make me read that one too, which I
and
will.
it's because it's going to have fire cover art.
And then I'll flush that from my brain as well.
So you talked a little bit about the end. Talk to me about the end. How did you feel about it? What did you think? Let's start with Lisbeth. The floor is yours. The conch is yours.
All right. So I've said many times that I don't understand half the time when the sisters get all like, oh my God, I made a mistake or I doubted or blah, 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 blah. Okay. So she did that. Oh, it was because she felt like she didn't deserve the honor of being St. Catherine. All right. Just stop. All right. All I can think of now is Monty Python. It's like every time I try to talk with somebody, it's like, sorry this, forgive me that, and I'm not worthy. It's kind of how this feels. You get an honor and they're immediately like, but I'm not worthy. Oh, just shut up. Just stop.
At that point has your dogma and your
you know what, you don't see this in the Christmas pageant. Little kids, when they get to play the Mother Mary, they don't sit there and whine that they're not worthy. All right, they get excited that they're actually going to be up there on stage so that their parents can see them. Okay, they actually get like a role, like people know who they are. You kind of have this with the St. Catherine little, the ceremony. And all you can do is whine about how unworthy you are. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's not
that
like
comparison just broke my brain a little bit.
Because I'm right.
I do know you're right, actually. Yes. There is this that
Because obviously she was worthy. The light of St. Catherine came in her and she ended up killing like a whole bunch of demons and saved the abbey. Okay? And then she decides, but I'm not worthy. Bitch, shut up, you are. It's been proven. All right?
yes.
But she decides that she's not. And so she's like, I want to take on the Repentia. And the canoness is like, well, sorry, they're dead. So I got no one to, make you that right now. But whenever we get one, we can talk about it. 100 years later. 100 years later. And
100 years later.
Yeah, seriously. All right, bring that meme in there. Exactly.
SpongeBob voice.
You are still going on about this 100 years later.
This is where my complaints come in.
And not only that, but then you decide to go to the extra extreme and get your mouth sewn shut. What is wrong with you?
There was that horror movie from the 90s, and I can't think of what it is right now. Somebody will probably have it immediately. The cover had the girl who had her mouth sewn shut, and I got dragged to see that because I like a good horror movie, and that was not a good horror movie.
I've not seen that movie, but I know exactly what cover you're talking about.
You know the exact cover I'm talking about, right?
Because that disturbed me horribly.
Let's see. Oh God, this is amazing. I just put it into the Strangeland. That's the one. That's 100% the one. That was a D. Snyder. The 90s were an odd time, y'all. As soon as she said that, and I have a real issue, like generally just face stuff. Eye injuries are a real big trigger for me, but this is where, and she was like all the things that I just said about the sisters. She was that like, little outlier out there. And I did occasionally feel like every time I was like, this is so beautiful and he's doing such a good job, she would show up and be like, hi. Except not, because her mouth is sewn shut. This is the point where I'm like, okay, mayhaps the dogma and the adherence to this ceremony, maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe we need to take a step back and look at this, because when all of a sudden you have people, because we saw this similar thing, and I really like Deanie Ware, but we saw this in her Triumph of St. Catherine story, where the girl who was chosen to be Catherine, wait for it, did not feel worthy. And I don't understand how that, and granted, you don't want the person who's like, shit, yeah, I'm Catherine, sign me up.
Yeah, but
Like, I am her,
there's
redo.
at some point where the imposter syndrome gets ridiculous.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing and that's what frustrated me with that particular part of the story, is it's because why didn't you have why aren't the sisters, why don't you have someone there to basically grab you by the shoulders, slap you across the face, and be like, grow up? But I
100
guess because they all feel it too.
years.
100 years. Like, look, I get it. Initially, you're
You didn't
given
even
it.
have Branwen, who was convinced that she got her holy power from you.
Mhm.
Like, that's not enough to make you feel better. Like if nothing else, even if that wasn't like your holy power, the fact that you took your time to put your hands on a little girl who was crying over spilling dirty water on your shoes.
Mhm.
How saintly is that? And
Right.
and you still can't.
Well, in both of those characters, actually, I struggled with a little bit, and that is where I really struggle with that concept of, again, is this because it's a sister? Is it because it's a female character? Do you not want her to be like, wow, but like, I don't feel like that should be a bad thing of being like, wow, it's a big honor. Like, this is a big thing. Even going beyond the Christmas pageant, right? Like in your plays in high school, right? You get to be chosen to play Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors. Like, wow, that's a big responsibility. It's okay to doubt yourself, but do it. Right? The fact that it would be one thing if this was the first woman ever in the history of ever who was just like, I am not worthy. But we've read 2 books with this particular bit, granted not to this extreme in that book, but we've
Mhm.
also read other stories where there's like a holy ceremony or something and one of them just falls all over themselves. I'm not worthy. Okay, maybe we're doing something wrong here. Maybe we need to reevaluate how we're approaching this,
Like
because
and I understand the feeling, and that I think it's partially, I think more women feel this way than men. The feeling of that we're not worthy of something, because there's that whole women do have a more of an issue self-esteem than men do in general, or men just mask it really, really well. Take your pick. But at the same time, there are plenty of women that are going to be around you to do a, Sharon Moonstruck thing, snap out of it. But you're here now. And I know you don't feel this way, but you're here now. No one counseled her in 100 years. Like, seriously, like Branwen, the canoness, her friends, nobody? 100 years. I'm not buying it.
100 years and not a single person. Not a single person.
You haven't gotten over your feeling of unworthiness and playing the role of St. Catherine in 100 years. I have a really hard time buying that.
But here's the thing that I would also say about that, and this is the thing that was a little frustrating with me, is that if you get, like, eventually, using the current nomenclature, right, of imposter syndrome, eventually it is a self-fulfilling prophecy of, I am not worthy, I am not good at my job, I am not good at this, and eventually that kind of becomes true because you're so fixated on that, and you sit there and you obsess over it and you think about it and just, oh, I'm not as good as these other people, and I'm not worthy of this, and I'm not worthy of this, and oh my god, I'm just like, and you really get the impression that this was really becoming like, this was basically a I don't know the word I'm looking for here for her, but it was almost a handicap to her of like, so at that point, yeah, maybe you aren't. Like, if it takes you 100 years to snap out of this, like, what good were you really even doing for your
Right.
fellow sisters if you were so big? And the thing about imposter syndrome that we don't really talk about either, that is, and especially in this particular instance of it, it's very self-focused.
Yeah.
Like, you spend a lot of time looking inward. And look, as a person who occasionally struggles with it, I totally get it. I spend a lot of time doing a lot of self-assessing, right? So I'm not necessarily throwing shade of like, who even gets imposter syndrome? But like,
Right.
eventually you have to be like, wait a minute. okay, no, like I cannot spend my whole life just looking inward and fixating on this particular thing. I have to move forward. I have to do things. And so to see a sister of battle, again, going back to that wasteful thing, she wasn't literally throwing herself at death, but figuratively, were you really as useful as you could have been? Were you all there? Were you as good as a nun with a gun as you could have been? I'm going to actually go ahead and step on a limb and say no.
Yeah, probably not.
And it's a little worrisome to me because I think she was supposed to be portrayed as being very sympathetic.
Maybe.
Did you like her end?
No.
Sorry, phrasing.
I mean, I think because I liked her character in the beginning. Because I understood it like, oh, no, I shouldn't get this role. Like, it should be somebody else, someone who's been here longer, someone who's done better things. I understood that. And then I understood, like, at the end, she's like, that point, she's like, I think I should take on the Repentia. And she's like, well, we can't do that right now. I was like, okay, but she'll grow out of it. It's been a while. And then she didn't. I was like, if there's anything I don't like in a book, it's a character that doesn't grow, especially a character. Now, it's one thing for the villain to not grow, right? Or these NPCs, like the Chem Dogs. Did they grow? Not really. No, but they're not supposed to. And it'd be disappointing if they suddenly, like, did an about face and totally repented of their ways, right?
I am a good person.
Right. Yeah. That wouldn't have been believable. And, but for like a mean-ish character to not grow.
And especially
to be stuck,
over the timeline we're talking about.
To be stuck in on yourself for that long and not change and not grow and not adapt. Like, sorry. Like,
time.
And you know what? And I honestly
plays an element here.
I honestly wonder if we were supposed to be sympathetic to her. And I say that because I think Justin Hill has an interesting view on the Sisters of Repentia as it is. I wrote down like a couple of things because I barked a laugh. I think it was page 122 in my book when they talked about how they're going to go through the Cicatrix Maledictum and they probably weren't going to live. And they talked about how the Sisters of Repentia were cheering. I burst out laughing. So I almost wonder if he kind of finds them a little ridiculous as well. The fact that he talked about how they were cheering. And then he even talks about later.
That's a good point.
Talks about later how when they got released and they were like, let us at the demons. That cracked me up. Just how they were like, yes, let's go. So that's kind of funny. And
I would say that you're right, because on one hand it was played for a laugh and it was good. And I chuckled at it. I was like, of course they're cheering. But it also kind of rubbed me the wrong way because, again, going back to the wastefulness thing. Okay, so you guys go through this Cicatrix Maledictum and the whole ship, like the Geller ship fails and everybody dies. Did you really serve the Emperor in the best you could? Is that your repentance? Preston X'd it out.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe there was a better way that you could have done that. Just throwing that out there. Like,
oh, but sisters, but Saint Celestine was in the Repentia. Okay, but she got over it.
Yeah.
When she realized that the Emperor's power was flowing through her, she wasn't sitting there and going, oh my God, but I'm not worthy of this power. I don't need to have this. Like, that, I shouldn't have this. No, she sucked it up and she threw herself into battle time and time and time and time again. Yes, she got her Repentia wish. She dies a lot. But at the same time, she continues to serve.
Right. And she also doesn't throw her life away needlessly. At least not in some of the books that we've seen. Where are some of the big high-profile deaths that we've read with her lately, right? A little thing called the Fall of Cadia.
Yeah. Well,
You may have heard of it. She fights Karn, of all people, on that one planet where they're trying to get the that beacon off of there because they're on the wrong side of the rift.
Right.
And then in her book proper, that world is in serious jeopardy, and she's able to have a noble sacrifice for herself. Like, she's not just like, oh, there's a landmine. Don't worry, I'll just go take it out and I'll come back someplace else. It's fine. It's no big deal. I mean, even she is a little choosier. It's one of the, again, it is
Whereas
one of
the
those
Sisters
things.
of Repent, you're like, minefield, let's go. And just,
Let's go. I mean, if we have to go through that minefield, then okay. That's fine. Whatever. Do what you're going to do.
yeah,
I
but
still feel like we could have used you in other places, though,
well,
with your chain
we couldn't have a
swords.
tactical discussion of how maybe we could trigger their minds in other ways. You guys are just going to go, nope, Leroy
We'll
Jenkins
just run
across that
through it.
place.
Yeah, I feel like there's always a cautionary tale in there about zealotry in general. But all right, let's do a little meta talk here because everything we've talked about tonight really ties into this meta commentary. You and
Okay.
I were both a little shocked to learn that this book's getting a little bit of flack online. I spent today going down a rabbit hole on Reddit,
Oh,
looking
I'm
at
sorry.
oh
See,
yeah.
I just went down Goodreads and I saw people hated it. I was reading some of the reviews. I'm just like, I guess I'm cliche. That's all I got from the reviews. I guess I'm cliche.
The only thing, so first off, let's start high level. Why
Oh,
are people so vehemently mad about this book? Like, I, basically, my thought when I was going through Reddit, when people were just talking about like, oh, it's just bad, it's just badly written, I was like, have you read any of the Dawn of Fire books? If the answer is no, then I kind of understand your hatred a little bit more. Like, are we just shell shocked because of Dawn of Fire and a couple of other books that we've just kind of been like meh on lately? Like,
honestly, but I like
are we
Justin D.
spoiled?
Hill. I like his writing. I always have.
So
I mean, I liked Katia Stans. I liked Bookkeeper's Skull. I like this.
okay, that is actually that's actually a good question. That's a good point because I did see a lot of people who did say they were just like, oh god, these are just as bad as the Cadia books. Okay, maybe he's just not for everyone.
Well, it's like, okay, so we don't like Peter Fahavari. How alone were we
Oh my god, I
in
do feel
that,
like I'm the only person occasionally.
right?
Like when I look through
So,
Reddit, I'm like, there's something wrong with me.
well, yeah, I mean, it was like I said, like the reviews I saw on Goodreads, and they're like, oh, it's just so cliche. There's nothing new. And my first response to the nothing new is like, well, I don't need things to be lore breaking every single time. And I think,
Okay, well let's stop right there and say with Dawn of Fire, with the Lion coming back, with all of these like major we just read a book about Ingron coming
mm,
back. Are we spoiled? Are we like have we just gotten accustomed with all the books that they've been re-releasing recently? Are we as a fan base, are we is that what we're looking for? Is it does are we just accustomed to wow, no, like this book ends in a call to Robbie Bobby?
maybe, but why don't you just go back to my tirade after reading Penitent, right? That I don't need every book to be some lore breaking moment. Maybe I just want a good story in the universe. This did it.
It's okay. Like one of the
It's
reasons
like honestly, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
when I'm reading comics, all right, I don't need every issue of my comic series to be this mind blowing revelation about something in the universe. I don't. And actually some of my favorite comics are the ones that are kind of what they would call filler. One of my favorite Flash comics ever is a random Christmas issue where it kind of takes place outside of like the main story going on in the DC universe. And he and Kid Flash are like doing these random things to kind of save Christmas, like to the point where we have Clayface yelling, Santa, do you want a piece of this? It's amazing. That kind of stuff is funny. Maybe it's because I like humor too, but I don't need everything to be so grimdark, and I don't need not grimdark, but I don't need everything to be like, well, this is where the codex changes, or this is where this changes, because it gets tiring for one. Two, then you're always trying to one up everything, right? And then you also get the issue of how many lore breaking things have we had be retconned in the codex later, right? And everyone's like, oh, that's just
Yes.
Warhammer. Okay, that's fine. That's just Warhammer. Okay, the comics do that too. It doesn't mean that I like it when it happens. Sometimes it's just nice to
Yes.
have a story in that universe. And in a way, that's one thing. So, we talked like outside the podcast, but like let's look at Star Wars. All right. I really liked Rogue One. One thing I really liked about Rogue One is that it wasn't lore breaking. There was nothing in there that was brand new and revolutionary.
It was more bolstering.
It was just, like halfway through the movie, I was like, oh my God, they're going to die. And everyone, like, and Sean was like, my husband, he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're not in the fourth movie. They're not in A New Hope. I know they're going to die. Like, that's just how it is. And it made sense. You got to see, Grand Moff Tarkin, how really what an asshole he really is. Like, we had ideas, but now you really get to see it like in the forefront. Some people I know hated that movie, and I think it was because it didn't bring anything new. Well, I don't need something new every single time I pick up a book in a series. Now,
I'll agree with that.
There's issues with that. Just look at the Wheel of Time series. All right.
Okay, but there's a difference between I haven't moved the lore forward and I haven't done anything new, and 3/4 of this book is just a summary of the last book. There's a difference.
I'm just saying, like, that's what I'm like. I just like a nice story in the universe, but we don't need to go to snail's pace either, right?
Right. Well, this to me is like, we use the phrase bolter porn a lot, and bolter porn to me is kind of like summer blockbuster movies, right?
Yeah.
Look, there's a reason that in the summer, all the movie studios, historically, pre-COVID really, would release all of their popcorn movies, all of your action movies, all of your romantic comedies, your coming of ages, right? These all come out in the summer because people just want mindless entertainment. They just want to go see a movie where they can turn their brain off for a few minutes and be like, that was fun, right? Like, so one of the games, if you don't play the box office game, let me recommend that to friends and family because we play it religiously. But one of the things about the box office game that I really like is there are some movies, every now and then you find those outliers and you're like, they released that movie in October? And it's weird. The other thing that I had to explain to my husband, and thank God, box office has definitely has bolstered my theory on this and my saying this, and I now can point to this. When do horror movies release? In the fall and in the winter. They release in February when they're not going to be releasing anything major, right? And they release around October. But that's because they want to get out and go and do something. So you give horror movies because it's dark and people like to be scared, and teenagers, right? But this book to me, I was like, going into this book, like after we were talking about all the hatred for it, I'm like, I just don't see anything. There's one thing that you touched on that I do want to address in here, and this is a product of Black Library / Games Workshop's own issues. And that is the fact that they do jump that 100. So the rift opens and then they jump 100 years into the future.
So I was warned that was going to happen by one of our wonderful people in our Discord. They talked about that. I was like, oh God, that just makes like this whole like Dawn of Fire thing and all this stuff like moot, right?
Right.
So I was prepared to hate it. And in the end, I really didn't, because it doesn't matter.
So that was kind of where I was getting at, was that irritating?
I think it might irritated a lot of people.
It irritated a lot of people, and that has come up a lot. But here's the thing that I'm going to say about that. It was one of those things where I read it and I was like, weird? Like, that's really odd. Did they not get the memo? Was this book in draft before that happened? Like, has this book been in editing for that long? Wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think so, though. I just think it just doesn't matter.
The thing that I was like, ultimately, at the end of the day, does it really matter? One of the things that you and I have said, and this has been one of our complaints / just we've kind of come to accept this, is that what even is time in the Warhammer 40k universe? What even is time? Like, does is the Dominus Crusade 100 years? Is this book set during the Rift, after the Rift, 5 years before, 100 years before? No, yes, the answer is yes. Ever since they stopped dating all of the stories with like blah 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 here on this date, M34, M42, whatever. If that's the thing, like, again, it was enough that I went, okay, weird. But I promptly figured either it was a mistake or this book was being written before they retconned and changed the timeline. Either way, it's not core. It's not necessarily core to the story. And if anything, it actually makes her whole, like, still being, I'm not worthy, a little more understandable if it was only 12 years. Still too long, friend. But not as obscene as 100 years.
I don't think it was a mistake. I just think it was it's just a story to tell.
You know what? That could also be part of it. It's just a story. Like, he just had a story, and that's not even like the main part of it. And like, some people, I saw some of the hatred for it about like it not being lore breaking. They were just like, well, it's just a really like trite. It's a very standard plot. It's not that exciting. There's no mystery and blah 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 blah. Well, you guys, I got a shelf full of books like that. Like, Warhammer books over there. I can point to about like 20 of them over there right off the top of my head that were either very rote. I won't say trite. I will say rote, as in they're just kind of your standard plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Person arrives on planet. Oh no, things aren't good. How do we fix the problem? Yay, we fixed the problem. I also hate to break it to you, but that's the vast majority of movies.
Right.
I hate to break it to you. That's like most things. So it doesn't, and not everything. Again, you mentioned Penitent, which, first off, rude. Second off,
that book lives rent free in my head.
Oh, yours and mine both. There are so many scenes in that book. Those also, like in the shower, most often will just pops in there. It just pops in there. Why? But that's a really
I could
good
set fire to it, like the giant marshmallow man. But
yeah, pretty much. And send it back through some gate of non-existence. One of my favorite questions to ask in an AMA is, if you could erase any one song from existence, what would it be? And I think my new question for Warhammer 40k people will be, if you could erase any one Warhammer 40k book, Black Library book, from existence, what would it be? And why is it Penitent?
you see, I have a different one.
Oh. What?
It's an Ultramarines book written by Ian St. Martin.
Oh, that's a Sophie's choice.
You know which one I'm talking about.
Okay, I'd go with that one. Okay.
Because at least I can say Penitent happened way in the past.
That's true. That is true.
And
Okay,
literally nothing in that. Nothing, and literally nothing that happens in that matters.
That's a hard one. That's such a hard one.
But it doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's in the past.
Until they make it matter. God, I don't know.
Oh my God. Do you know what's going to happen? Something that's going to happen in the End of the Death Part 2, because Abnett's writing that, I'm assuming he is.
Yeah.
Is going to be referenced in Pandemonium.
Yay! I forgot that there's going to be a third book.
Yeah, we can't just claim that Valdor is the Yellow King that Eisenhorn's been after all this time without having a third book.
We're back to erasing Penitent. Sorry. He's just going to have Marnius Gage's skull. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
No.
The good news is I think they've kind of disavowed knowledge of that book.
I think they kind of disavowed everything he wrote, but anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, but yeah, like, it doesn't need to be this level of cleverness of like, ooh. And you're right, it goes back to comic books. And maybe you and I just have PTSD from comic books where like, again, let me tell you that like every 2-3 arcs of comics, we've got to have some major reveal that, oh, you thought this all along. Oh, no. No, 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 no. It was really this. And then, like, 10 arcs later, oh, you thought it was this? Oh, no, 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 no. It was this.
No, it's
Like,
not
it just...
revealed. It's not revealed in the arcs later. It's revealed in the annuals.
Okay, that's true. Yes, good point. But it's like, it's one of those things where they keep just trying to make these little nuggets and these little tweak things. And now I will say that one of the things you and I pointed out recently was that, well, semi-recently, actually last year, was that every book that we read kind of gives this little flavor lore thing, right? Like the I think it was the Bookkeeper's Skull is really where they detail groks
Right.
and the farming of them.
Yeah, we learned a lot
And-
about groks ranching.
Yes. And that was... It's groks, right?
Yeah.
The giant lizard things.
Yep.
Okay. All of a sudden I was like, wait, did I just cross my streams in my head?
No.
There's a lot about that in there. Like, we learned all about that, right? And there's all these little things here and there where we just learn these little pieces of flavor text. And I will say that's not in here, but again, it doesn't have to be. This was just supposed to be a mindless story. That mindless isn't the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, just a, hey, it's kind of like Bolter porn, and we're going to just read about the sisters, and they're going to be badasses. And I don't understand the level. Again, going through Reddit in particular, I was like, people are very, very, I mean, like, people, there was one where somebody was just like, everything about this book is garbage. Whoa.
Everything? Wow.
That's a strong stance to take. And some of the Goodreads reviews, too, were just like, this is a waste of time. Okay. Maybe they'd read Requiem Infernal and thought they were reading this? I don't know.
They probably also like think Requiem Infernal was just mind blowing.
Could be.
Again, we were very alone in our thoughts about that. So if we're alone in our thoughts about this, well, I guess I'm going to be okay with that, because if it's liking this over liking Requiem Infernal, then I guess that I am cliche and trite and whatever, but I like what I like.
I liked the book. I thought it was fun. I was really shocked by the very low rating on it and the number of people who don't like it. And again, my first thought was, are you reading the Dawn of Fire books?
What about,
Like,
okay, so like, what about Kazrakin? Great book.
oh,
Phenomenal
I love that
book.
Yes.
Did that have anything lore breaking in it? No. No.
Not really, no.
But it was phenomenal.
That didn't. Yeah. Actually, I would even go ahead and step out on a limb and say, for all the people who enjoyed Requiem Infernal, nothing really lore changing in there. It was certainly was not a very original plot. Time
Excuse
loop.
you. Time loop is very original.
Well, yeah, time loop and a woman who has like basically multiple personality, secret evil entity. Like, as you said, Heroes did it, so probably not the most original plot that you've ever seen. Like, again, not everything has to be this giant leap forward in the lore. And quite frankly, I'm telling people right now, like, I feel like reading some of these reviews, I'm like, I don't know that you guys are, and I know that we kind of are starting to sound a little defensive here. I just was so baffled by it. And like, I don't feel like you guys read comics, because this is not a path down which you want to go.
Right?
Yeah, it only ends in frustration and pain. I promise you that.
And retcon. So much
And
retcon. And
so much
reboots.
retcon.
Do you want reboots? This is how you get reboots.
This is how you get reboots, people. Like, do you want the
already
Cicatrix Maledictum to really have just reset the entire timeline? Because that's what that gets us.
Because we've already had one reboot. Reboot Gulliman.
Hey-o!
We can't. That's actually probably one of my favorite memes. And now we just got another one with a lion. So, you know, I guess also thinking back on it, kind of doing some self-reflection here, like thinking back on like what our favorite books were over the years, there wasn't really that many that were lore breaking that we just loved, you know, outside of like, you know, Dark Imperium, that trilogy, Apocalypse. Oh yeah, that was one we just loved. We both liked The Lion a lot, but as a whole, though, most stuff that we really, really, really liked were not these gigantic,
Assassinorum Kingmaker, Infinite and the Divine, and that's
oh
the
my
thing that
God,
I would say
Infinite and
too about
Divine was
Infinite and the Divine.
amazing.
I mean, well, okay, actually, Infinite and the Divine. I said that, and then I was like, actually, because it does reveal the whole idea that their resistance figure was really just another one of the Catan. Um, that's a pretty big reveal, but like,
Kind of.
my caveat to that would be, oh my God, that's huge. And like, they basically released a spoiler from 10 billion years ago.
Right, but it doesn't really change anything.
It doesn't really
Right?
change the lore or anything. It's fun. I really liked it. We really liked the Carcharodon's book. All of the Carcharodon's books that we read. Not a lot of lore changing stuff there. I feel as though sometimes certain books just don't land, and I don't understand it.
No, I mean, what we say all the time, like people like different things.
I do like different things. Like, I'm not here to tell you that this was like the greatest book that's ever come out. Best book we've read.
No, I guess
That was
if, I guess the criticism just confuses me because if you want to say this is cliche and this, nothing changed, this didn't mean anything. Well, like you said, let's just go point. I mean, look at my library behind me. I mean, how many of those, are not cliche or didn't change stuff? Oh, I would say a lot of them. And I would say that the ones that are trying to not be cliche and change stuff, The Dawn of Fire, are some of the weakest books in the entire Black Library history. I'm so disappointed in how disappointed I am in those books.
Yeah, and that's a thing too, where yeah, I think that's a really good way to put that. And I feel as though I'm on my this is killing me right now because there's a really funny comment where it's like there's a really funny comment that's the summary of every story ever told. And I can't find it right now off the top of my head, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. So I will find that though and share that on the next one. But it there's a funny pithy thing that basically is the summary of every story that's ever been told. So if you want to really really get reductive here.
Well, I mean, what I was always told is that, if you want to know every single plot, you read Edith Hamilton's mythology, Shakespeare, and the Bible. Or the most reductive form is 2 dogs, 1 bone.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other version of that, of course, is 2 dogs, 1 bone. But there's another one that's really funny, and I can't think what it is right now. But yeah, basically everything comes down to 2 dogs, 1 bone. And if we really want to get in the weeds there, like I want you to think of the most mind-blowing thing you've ever read or ever seen, and it probably boils down to 2 dogs, 1 bone. Like, I absolutely love Pulp Fiction. Love it. But the definition of that is dog trying to retrieve his bone.
Yeah.
You can get very, very reductive here. And so that's one of those things where, and I'm not trying to be like all defensive, like you guys are all wrong.
I feel like we're getting a little preachy.
I know, right? God, it was one of those things where I was like, this really shocked me. Having said that, we are now that we're back in the swing of things and we're getting back into our schedule here, I'm very excited that we get to read actual bolter porn. We get to read Leviathan by Darius Hinks. It's so shiny.
My book cover is kind of shiny. See how the reflects?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that. It's all embossed. We don't look at this side. We just look at this side. Very excited for this, even though it involves Tyranids.
Wow. But we've never read a Darius Hinks book on the podcast. So there's that. Yeah, we haven't.
That can't be possible.
Because the only ones that we've read are the Mephiston books, and I know you didn't read those.
No, absolutely not. Is that?
That's true.
Dang.
I know, because I was filling out the stuff on our website, so I know it's the only
You
one.
are absolutely right. Holy cow.
It's like I don't
Well,
know
there
my
we
own
go.
website.
Because I was like, that's not true. I read. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yay, cool.
Yep.
Reading a Darius Hinks book. God. Now I have a lot of questions as to why that is. Anyways, join us next time for Leviathan. Hopefully there will be no emergency surgeries, so we're going to be fine and we're going to read everything on schedule.
Well, like I told you in the hospital, you've run out of organs. You can have expunged.
It's pretty true. All the superfluous ones are now gone.
Yes.
So yay!
Yay, but yet not yay.
But the tonsils? I guess I forgot that the tonsils are an organ per a
Oh,
previous
yeah.
conversation.
And I did say you could remove the spleen, but that's like really extreme.
I'm good.
Yeah. And that's another abdominal surgery, and you don't want that. No. I mean, maybe one kidney. Maybe.
I don't want to lose anymore. I'm good. Thank you.
Let's make that a goal, right? No more organs. So, anyway. So you've listened to the Warhammer 40k book club episode regarding Pilgrims of Fire by Justin D. Hill. Be sure to join us next time for Leviathan by Darius Hinks. We are an unofficial book club and not affiliated with the Black Library or any of its affiliates. You can find both the vidcast and podcast on our website, WH40kbookclub.com. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, give a review, and all those things to the vidcast on YouTube or the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Our site also has articles about adventures and reading other Warhammer 40k books and short stories outside of the book club books, so please stay a while and read from a crag. Yeah, I mean, I got the mug and everything, so yep, I'm definitely Alfarius tonight.
Get you some Ultramarines. This is like the bluest book I have ever purchased. It is blue on blue on blue with shiny blue.
That's true, because you did not get the Ultramarines version of the Indomitus book.
No, that was my chartreuse.
Which is probably the bluest book.
So get you some Ultramarines.
It's like midnight blue.
It's like aggressively blue.
Yeah. Very disappointed I was in the queue 2 minutes after you.
Sound off on the queue system below, because Lord knows we have thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's gone to our benefit and sometimes it has not. Obviously, this one time, it did not go my way. But, you know. Anyway, for that, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.